Perfect. So we are live. Good to go. Again, Deebthik, once again, a great welcome to the community talks. Again, giving a gist about what we do here. We host speakers and industry experts who share their insights about the domain they are currently working on, so that other people from the developers community they get an idea about how to get started with that particular domain and how can they excel in the particular area as well. So again, starting with an introduction, could you just give your introduction? What do you do currently? Where you come from? And yeah, over to you.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. So yeah, my name is Deebthik Ravi. I'm a 2020 graduate from NIT Trichy, and I've been a cybersecurity enthusiast for the last 4 or 5 years since high school actually. And so I've been working over at Visteon. It's an automotive tech company, and I've been working in their cybersecurity department for over the past year and a half, and it's been going well.
Perfect. Again, you mentioned you've been in the industry for the last 4 to 5 years. It's quite a long duration of time, and I guess you had an amazing experience so far. So again, over asking you on that, how has been the experience so far of contributing to only cybersecurity domain? How do you see this domain different than any other, maybe cloud computing or maybe other divisions that we have in tech as a IT related jobs? How do you see this domain different, and what has been your experience so far?
Yeah, so my industrial experience has only been, I would say, for about a couple of years, including my internships from college, and they've been really good. Firstly, because the scope for them is immense right now, as everyone would say, it's an emerging field, and there's a lot of scope for research and jobs and so on. So that's been really good. Like in terms of the ease of getting into it, and also in terms of the learning curve that you get to experience inside of it once you start working on it. So that's been really good. And since it's an emerging field, you have a lot of things to learn as days go by. So you have new topics coming up, you have new threats coming up, and as a result, you also have a lot of new defense mechanisms coming up in cybersecurity. So it's just a lot of new concepts that are emerging. And yeah, so in terms of contribution, so right now I'm in the automotive field of cybersecurity. So to be frank, it's not even a field that I knew existed before I got this opportunity. So it's also helped me, you know, uh, get aware that there's a lot of fields that you really might not be aware of until you actually see them out there in the world. So this was one of them for me, and I'm really glad that I'm a part of it and that I'm able to uh, contribute to it a lot. Yeah.
Perfect. Again, coming back to the same, as you mentioned, there has been a lot many domains which are not aware about. People would not definitely know that okay, cybersecurity also exists in this particular area.
Mm.
Talking about it, how had your experience been in terms of cybersecurity, like choosing cybersecurity as a track? Like, how did you decide to pursue it as a career? And because it's not something that everybody is doing right now, very few people
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
be in any university they'll be kind of pursuing the career. Again, there's a lot of trending topics in terms of when you say cybersecurity, people will definitely come to know it's about hacking, something like that, or what is
Yeah.
it about?
Yeah.
So how did you decide? What has been your motivation so far to carry out your career so far in cybersecurity?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, like most people, my influence to the field was also hacking, like just that word hacking in back in high school. So that's how I guess most people enter into it. At least people who don't have much of knowledge in that field and who are just interested, And so that's something that gets people curious, which is definitely a good thing. And once you go past that point, you obviously have to do a lot of research, and you have to, put in efforts to actually know a lot of things that are not just hacking. Hacking is like a very, very small part of cybersecurity, but that's definitely something that's trendy, as you mentioned. So it's something that attracts people into the field. So what got me into it was also that to begin with back in high school, and then it was more of the elimination of things that I didn't want to do. So at the time, ML and AI was the catchy word around everywhere, and I quite soon realized that I was not interested that much in ML or AI or data science, and I only had a few other options that I was aware of, and they were like probably, as you mentioned, cloud computing and blockchain, and there was just something that drew me into cybersecurity, even though I didn't know much about it. So I just made a conscious effort to learn more about it, and the more I learned, fortunately, it just drew me even more into the field. So that's how I got started. And in college, it was more. I didn't have a lot of resources to learn this inside of college, especially given my major, which was not computer science, and so it was mostly just me using resources of the internet or interacting with people online on different forums on LinkedIn and trying to set up a community within college with people who are interested, which was only a handful, but still it was good enough. So it was mostly self-driven and self-taught. That's what I'd done.
Cool. You mentioned about your, your degree being specifically for electrical, and you currently pursuing cybersecurity. How difficult was it to manage your academics alongside your, passion at the same point of time?
Yeah, it was quite difficult. I mean, yeah, as it is for most people who aren't interested in that major and not something else, it's always difficult. So it was the same for me as well. Like I just made a I just had to work towards my academics that was related to my major with not a lot of interest. So it was more of just doing it for the sake of doing it and not with a lot of interest. So the only time I got to pursue my actual interest was outside of the class and outside of class hours. So it was quite difficult in terms of maintaining a good fair share of balance between what you want to do and what you have to do in college.
Definitely, definitely, and keeping in mind that BTech is a degree which requires you to give a lot of time to it, and
Yeah.
a lot of assignment semesters and all these sort of things. Definitely. Talking about, you mentioned you building a community, right? So
Mhm.
did you were you part of different student clubs or other societies that are there in colleges, and how do you think they matter in terms of giving you a exposure or maybe an environment, an ecosystem where you can learn something and grow parallel, and also maybe grow your network at the same point of time?
Yeah, that's right. So it does matter a lot. So in my case, we only got the opportunity to start a club towards the end of our third year. So we started a student chapter of OWASP in our college. So that was something that really kicked off our interaction between multiple people, and also not just in our batch, but also it trickled down to our junior batches and also our senior batch. So uh, of course, like having a community will definitely help, not just for this field, but for any field, because group studies always good. We get to bounce off of ideas from other people and, share your ideas and get feedback on them. And it'll just help everyone in that group grow as fast as possible, as opposed to you just doing it all on your own. So it was definitely good. So in my case, it was the OAS per student chapter that helped. So we had regular brainstorming sessions. We used to, share whatever we learned or found out that week about, say, a new threat or bug bounty challenges. And we tried to make sure that each one of us had their own individual expertise, so that the knowledge sharing session wouldn't really be redundant. So each one had their own piece of information that they would share. And at the end of the day, we all used to go back with everything with a broad range of knowledge and things that we learned. So yeah, we try to make sure that we had regular sessions where we used to brainstorm and share uh, ideas, and also we used to try to host talks for people outside of the club so that it would increase our presence within the college. So that was good. Yeah.
Definitely. Again, coming back to it, what is if let's say you have been in the industry for a long duration of time, you when you started, you probably would not have got a lot of mentorship, because I presume that this domain doesn't really, you won't really find a proper mentor in a college who is an
Right.
expert of
Yeah.
cybersecurity. Definitely. So, what was the roadmap that you followed? That maybe some websites, some or maybe what subjects did you prefer learning first, and what was your track that you followed in order to get started with cybersecurity as a wholesome career?
Okay. Yeah. So in terms of like dedicated study or yeah, so in terms of just cybersecurity, I was mostly like, at least me personally, I was like mostly concentrating on cryptography. because I was really interested in doing a lot of research in college. So the regular track for any college student is to have a good share of internships in companies and internships under professors, which is like research based. So that was the same for me as well. So I want to have a good share of company internships and also professor internships. So what I tried to do was I tried to uh, make sure that cybersecurity was part of both. So when I used to search for an industrial internship in some company, even if my role wasn't cybersecurity related, I was making sure that the company was at least cybersecurity related. So you could be a software intern, but in a cybersecurity company. So at least that context would be there, even if your role is not there that much. But yeah, in terms of research, I was mostly into cryptography, and cryptography, as people might know, is like a really really big part of security. So cryptography was something that I was into, and that also helped me jump into other domains inside of security research, which needed to have cryptography as a fundamental core. So that helped me approach more professors and get more internships on even more advanced topics and so on. Yeah. So that was how I carried out my journey in college. Yeah.
Okay. Again, you mentioned about internship. So, what would you suggest someone to to prepare themselves? Let's say someone is in third year or fourth year. Uh,
Hmm.
because again, Google and Microsoft, we know prepare for data structure algorithms and
Yeah.
go and apply and you'll get the job, right. You'll get the internship probably. What for cybersecurity? Let's say if one wanted to go for a cybersecurity intern role. What is that one thing that you would have to prepare for? Maybe in what way should you design your resume that can be get your chances a bit higher of getting the selection done?
Yeah. So for a college student, I would definitely say that you can't get away from the fundamental topics like the ones you mentioned, data structures or just all of the fundamental topics that would be there in any typical interview are things that would stay for cybersecurity as well. Not just cybersecurity, but for any field. Like you just can't get away with that. So you need to have all of them. You know, for sure, you need to be good at all of them, and only like to build on top of that. Of course, it's really not that common for companies to hire freshers for security roles, at least as far as I've seen. So in my case, I had to go for an off-campus job to make sure that I want to land in a security role because there was no company that offered a security role right off the bat during placements. And I assume that's the case for most colleges. But even if you were to try your best for something like that, it would just mostly be portraying your interest so that you can prove to an employer that you can really pull it off despite having no experience in the field, and also making sure that again your fundamentals are strong because you would need them for cracking any technical interview. There is no separate technical interview for cybersecurity. It's always the same, which is to do with competitive coding and data structures and the algorithms part and all that stuff. So that remains common among any niche inside computer science. So yeah, it's mostly making sure that you have a lot of interest and projects that may be generic in terms of the computer science part of it, but it somehow fits into the context of cybersecurity as well. So if someone's planning to say do GSOC, uh, the work might be generic, but they can make a conscious effort to pick an organization that is security related, which are there a lot in GSOC. So that like that, for example, is something people can do. And people, even if they want to do a normal SDE intern in a company, as opposed to going to say Google or Microsoft, they can find a really good niche startup, a good cybersecurity startup that would give them a bigger learning curve that they might have gotten in Microsoft or Google, and go for that. And make sure to explain all of that during an interview while talking to the employer, or at least in their resume, and making sure that it comes out as you being interested in the field much more than someone who's trying to be. So, yeah, that's how it will be.
Exactly. I think you mentioned about GSOC, right? So what kind of preparation someone would actually require for maybe GSOC is again, you have a lot of options there. You can go for any
Yeah,
organization. Right
yeah,
now, are contributing to different organizations. We also have cybersecurity related organizations there. So, what would be your recommendation to someone, even if they're trying to contribute in terms of open source, maybe connecting to the mentors? What would be your suggestion so that their chances of getting selection increases?
yeah. So I might not be the best person to give advice on this because I haven't done much, but I was definitely interested. It was something at the back of my head. But I have seen people doing it, so it would definitely, of course, to start with open source coding as soon as possible. Like as soon as possible, like even from the first year, because the more time you get with open source coding, the more I mean, the better hang it gives you of that entire area. Because it's something that you cannot afford to lose touch with at any point of time. You just have to keep interacting with it and just keep doing something for any repo, online. You just keep interacting and use. Okay, again, before this, it's extremely important that you get yourself familiarize with Git as much as possible. Because as far as I've seen, Git is not something that college syllabuses cover. And once you jump into your work, it's something that you cannot live without. So it's something you really have to know as well as possible, at least the basics. But obviously, preferably everything inside of it should be known. So Git is something you first have to get yourself extremely thorough with, and then in parallel jump into as much as open source coding possible online, and that would naturally pave your way towards GSOC. Like there's not really much of a dedicated roadmap towards preparing for GSOC, but it's just overall open source coding, and it'll just take you there automatically. Yeah. And in terms of choosing an organization, like I said, depends on. So you do have a lot of categories when you go to the GSOC list of organizations. So if we take cybersecurity for example, you like you have a lot of good organizations of late. So you just pick one, and preferably pick one that's not so hard to get. And I would say like pick that and start working towards it. Maybe like a year or half a year before the GSOC that you want to apply for, and do a lot of open source coding, and make sure that you're known in that community of developers, so that when you do apply, it'll be much easier to get a mentor, and also you'll be aware of what's going on in that specific organization. So you'll know exactly what's the labs there in terms of development. So if you know what the labs is, you'll definitely know uh, how to frame a really good problem statement that will make it much more likely to get accepted uh, into GSOC.
Definitely. You also mentioned about getting known in the community, right?
Mm.
And that somewhere aligns the objective of networking as well. And like, you need to have a good network. You have LinkedIn like a
Yeah,
platform to network a lot of people. How important do you think that becomes for a particular individual who is in third year or fourth year, maybe to get a good job or maybe a good opportunity as a whole? Like how important is networking? And if it is, how can someone excel it? Like there are also multiple ways to network, right? It's not just about connecting
yeah,
someone
yeah.
with.
Yeah.
So what would be your suggestion that what, this is the process, follow this, and maybe you'll have a great opportunity in your hand?
Yeah, so for starters, LinkedIn is of course a really, really good platform for people to interact with, and that's something that would suffice for most people. And in fact, for people who really concentrate towards their their CGPA and their academics and towards on-campus placements, they might even pull it off without a lot of social networking or interaction, because it's a set path that you just have to follow properly in order to get a job. But when it comes to off-campus placements or something that's very niche, and you really don't want to compromise on it, and you really want to get into that specific field, interaction, I mean, a good community and networking would really come into picture. So I would say LinkedIn for starters, and also there are a lot of developer communities out there, like say Slack, or it can be anything. But the most mainstream one is LinkedIn in terms of getting a job. In terms of getting a job is one thing, but the other thing is also in terms of learning new things, right? So you do have a lot of platforms out there that where people share your knowledge, and you have like, let's say Commudle is one example of that. So you do have platforms like that. But in terms of getting a job, LinkedIn is kind of outweighs everything else.
Perfect. Again, that was pretty much it about networking. But again, as I was mentioning, in cybersecurity, we observe that there are a lot of certifications that are available. Like if
Hmm.
I have to say about cloud computing or something, it's my we have something like you become a cloud practitioner or something like that that
Yeah,
helps
yeah.
you showcase your skills. But if you talk about cybersecurity, there are not many certifications. So what certification do you think are of very high value in terms of
Mhm.
if you are certified as a this particular certification, then someone will give you more value than someone else. So what kind of certifications that are available? Just give a insight over that.
Yeah, so this is actually a good topic to touch upon. So, certifications uh, per se aren't really necessary for someone to get into the field. So, certifications is more of uh, an on-paper authentication for your credentials. So, if anything, it'll definitely help you get past your HR round. Like people who are technically aware of your credentials but do know a certain set of terms. So not some, I would say a good share of companies do have a certain set of requirements in terms of what certifications people should have. And when a bunch of resumes land up on an HR person's desk, he would definitely look for that certification. And if it's there, that resume will be given a higher priority. But in terms of actual technical expertise, not a lot of certifications, in my opinion, really help. There are really good ones, but most of them, I would say, are just on paper credentials that would really not help you in terms of technical expertise, but will definitely help you get filtered much more in companies when you try to apply for a job. And there are broad categories in security certifications. Again, if you see computer science certifications, cybersecurity certifications take up like most of the space. The other domains don't have a lot of certifications. It's mostly work experience that speaks for you. But in cybersecurity, you have categories like the offensive side of it, the defensive side of it, and just theory and knowledge side of it, and also the managerial side of it, which is mostly taken by people who have like 10 plus years of experience. So for starters, I would say for a college student, he really not I mean he or she really need not restrict himself or herself to something that's very basic. Like for example, CompTIA Security Plus is a really basic cybersecurity certification that is meant for people with no work experience. But given the people I've seen and the exposure they have nowadays and how self-driven they are, their level of knowledge might really surpass that even right in the beginning. So they would actually be better off aiming for a certification that's much higher up the ladder. So I would say first, if you pick any certification, you gotta first go through the topics that it covers and the difficulty level, and also a general review of it online. Like I would say Reddit is a really good place to check the reviews for any certification. So in terms of these broad categories, so again, some person might be interested in pen testing. So he would have to go for certification on the offensive side. And if I have to pick one, OSAP is like the Bible of the offensive certifications. So it's a really good one. So that would suffice for anyone. There's nothing else that someone needs to do. You just like straight go for OSAP and try to get it, and you're done. On the defensive side, you have multiple options. All the CompTIA certifications are good. There are a bunch of others also, and in terms of managerial, that really would come into the scope for someone in college. So it's something that people need to take after like say 6 or 7 or 10 years. So that is something that people will not need to worry about. So it's mostly just defensive and uh, offensive. And again, speaking in an overall broad sense, there's also the alternative to certifications, which is an actual master's degree. So this is a common question that people usually ask: should I take a certification or should I do a master's in cybersecurity? So again, that really depends on. So most of the master's degrees would focus a lot on your research because most of the master's degrees end with your thesis, your final year thesis. So it's a lot focused towards research and actual academic classwork. So if someone's really interested in research, even a little bit, I would say it's much better to go for a master's. And again, there's the cost factor because Your master's degree is almost like 10x your certification. And there are some people who would not prefer to go over the journey of doing another degree and studying in the class and all that. So certifications might also be a good option for a lot of people. And it would also be much cheaper, and it wouldn't be as rigorous as doing a master's degree, and it'll take much less time also in terms of certification. So it's really up to what people are interested in. But this is how I would analyze the both of it.
That's really amazing, and yeah, like that's somewhere I can relate to it. Maybe real time experience and real time exposure of the work that you have to do definitely has a higher value than any sort of
Yeah,
certification,
yeah.
right? Cool. Talking about you currently contributing to a particular role for a straight.
Hmm.
You've been working in your firm since a long duration of time. Again, we often come across people who tend to change the role that they are working on. Maybe tend to change their companies very often, right? Maybe 1 year and a half, 1.5 year, and they'll switch back to some other role, maybe switch
Right.
back to some other
Mm.
company. So how do you think that there are definitely there are pros and cons of it, but according to you, in your opinion, what do you think is an ideal approach for a fresher? Let's say if I'm a fresher right now, I'm just
Mhm.
entering the industry. Is it good for me to switch from my work or the culture that I'm working in very fast, or very quick, or very often, or should I stick to one job and maybe focus into it and get some good experience, and then should I think about something else?
Yeah, so I would say on the long term, it's definitely better to stick with one job. But for most people, they really don't get to land in a role that they would want to settle in right after college. So most of them would definitely land into a role that they would want some experience in for a couple of years or maybe 3 or 4 years, and they would definitely have a foresight of switching to another role or maybe switching to a better company in terms of, let's say, brand or something like that. Because a lot of people will definitely have, they will have a dream of working in so and so company in terms of brand and credibility. Uh, and also, specifically in terms of cybersecurity, as I said, most of them will not hire freshers for the security role. So most of them will definitely land up in some sort of a feeder role in which they will have to get experience for 2 or 3 years and then eventually switch to a proper security role. So feeder roles can be anything like a normal software development engineer or an analyst or a data scientist. It can be anything that would just give you that work experience. So on the long term, it's definitely better to stick with one company because employers don't see it as a good trait when someone keeps hopping from company to company, especially when it's there's a thumb rule of you should not switch a company before you've done at least 2 years there. But that really doesn't apply to someone who's just finished college. So I've seen people switching jobs even after 6 months after they finish college because they just have to, bide their time to make sure that they get the thing that they actually wanted in the beginning, which they wouldn't have gotten during placements. So yeah, switching companies after 1 or 2 years for let's say like 5 or 6 years after you're done with college is definitely okay as long as it makes sure that your career is actually progressing towards what you want and not just randomly switching between companies just for the sake of it. So if it's actually making you grow and go towards the role that you want, the role or the company that you want, it's definitely okay. But on the long term, let's say like after you have 10 years of work experience, it's definitely better to stick with one company and like grow in that company and make sure you contribute a lot to the company because of how much time you actually spend there and gotten to know the work culture and the entire community within the company.
Definitely, completely understandable and agreeable on that as well.
Yeah.
Talking about online courses, right?
Hmm.
The COVID period, we definitely the online classes that was not as much as efficient and as it was not expected to be. And cybersecurity being in a domain, you don't really find offline resources in terms of a lot. You don't find a coaching center or you don't find a teachers teaching you cybersecurity as a whole.
Yeah.
So, what online courses did you refer or online resources that you referred, and maybe something that can help other people as well? Anything that you currently remember or anything that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, so I only remember mostly sticking with Coursera. So I really didn't go for any course that was like titled cybersecurity so and so. I just went for specific topics Like let's say I wanted to learn how machine learning coexists with cybersecurity. So I would go for a proper machine learning course, and then probably research on how that can be applied towards this field. And again, there are a lot of topics that come within the research niche of security, like cryptography is one of them, and you have a lot of other topics like that. So cryptography is probably the most important one. So that was one course I did back in Coursera. So I mostly stuck with Coursera, but I do know a lot of people who did, a proper paid course just for cybersecurity that would cover the end-to-end set of topics, which was also useful from what I observed. It was definitely useful for them, especially given that they really weren't aware of the domain at all before, before they started that course. So for people like that, it's definitely useful because it will give you the basics that you need to be aware of and things that you can use to then go further on to look up and do further courses in that would specialize in those topics specifically. So yeah, in terms of online courses, this is mostly it. And yeah, certifications would also come under a lot of these topics. So that's an alternative. But to begin with, I think simple courses like these off of Udemy or Coursera will be much better than jumping directly into a certification.
Correct. Okay. So we have got some questions from the audience as well.
Mm.
Again, Anuj, first question: important certification for cybersecurity. I think you have already answered that, right?
Yeah,
There are many, but again, you have to have a real-time skill for that, and maybe have a certification, but having a real-time exposure of work is much better,
yeah, that's
right?
right.
Again, Radhika Srivastav, how to write a good research paper. So yeah, like you've been mentioning about masters, and obviously masters is definitely related to research. And
Yes,
someone, let's say, it's preferably that someone would like to have masters from maybe a better university, maybe from countries like Germany or United States. And at that
that's
point of
correct.
time, becomes a very important part. You have to have research work. So
Yeah,
how a good research paper overall, or maybe overall, you can give an insight on how to contribute to research as a whole. Like how can you proceed to the domain as a whole?
that's it. Yeah, again, this is a really good topic to touch upon. So for research, again, so for most students, it's really hard for them to do it by themselves. You really need to have a mentor that can either be a professor or it can be, say, a PhD scholar under a professor or some sort of a research assistant who's working under a professor, but basically someone who's had way more experience than you have in research because it's a very tight knit community and it's a pretty tedious community and it requires a lot of discipline and so on. So you really have to follow a certain set of rules to actually succeed and do something and also contribute to that. So it's always better to be under a professor. And so in terms of topics, so there will, I mean, at any given point of time, there'll always be a set of topics that are, you know, that are worked a lot upon in that specific community. So again, professors will be the best people to give you an answer on this. So it's always better to uh, take a topic from the professor and work on that as opposed to you going the professor with your own topics. So because your topic might not be relevant to that field at that point of time and it would not have much of a scope. Even if you do contribute to a lot, and if you write a good research paper, it might be unlikely that it will be accepted by any conference or journal. So if you wanna if you wanna say in terms of the odds of you getting a paper published, it's always better to get a topic from the professor, and it almost always will be something that you might ended up being interested in at least a little bit. So it wouldn't matter. And in terms of writing a research paper, again, this is like a whole other topic because there's a lot of again there's a set of rules and guidelines you have to follow in terms of writing a research paper, like in terms of structuring it, uh, like everything, the problem statement, your methodology, and the way you approach the problem. Everything is already set out for the people who want to get into the research community. So it's not something you'll have to think a lot about, or so you just have to follow what's already been there and what's already established, and just use those guidelines, but make sure you route it your problem statement and your context. And for the most part, anyone who follows this properly will almost always end up getting their paper published. And yeah, it's also a matter of timing, and if that topic is actually meaningful and relevant to that field at that point of time. But
Correct.
yeah, it's something that I would really insist people try to do during their college time.
Yeah. Again, you mentioned that research being a domain where you have to have a mentor, you have to have a professor.
Yeah.
Let's say someone who has been in an institute where you won't really see a lot of research work happening.
Hmm.
What are the other ways they can connect to maybe professors and maybe research groups who can then assist them to contribute to any research topic whichever is available?
Yeah. So yeah, that's actually a good question. So if you really don't find someone within your college, LinkedIn won't help you. For so let me just begin by saying that LinkedIn won't help with this. So it would mostly just be word of mouth interactions and trying to get a contact outside of the college, maybe in a better college or maybe in another college in the same tier. So it would I would say, in my experience, what I've done is go to a specific college's website and go to the department that you want to do the research work in, and just make sure to see all the profiles and credentials of all the professors in there, and see all their publications and see their research interests. Because almost all colleges will definitely have all the list of professors, and along with that, they'll definitely mention the research interests of those professors too. So seeing that will definitely help you give an idea of filtering out all the professors and having your final list that you might want to approach. And in terms of approaching, I would say email is the only option that I've seen and done. So you just have to email all the professors, and when you email, it's more of a one-time thing, right? It's more of a do or die because professors are really busy, so they can't afford to see something that's really not attractive to them. So you have to make sure to draft a really really good cover letter that would appeal to the professor and have a really good resume that you'll be attaching to your email. And it's always better to personalize any sort of approach to a professor. This could be like maybe try to read a couple of their research papers and try to see what you really liked about it, and try to mention that in the email so that it would really appeal to the professor, and it could also show that you're actually interested in what they're doing. Because a lot of people use the same draft and they send it to multiple people, so it would sound very monotonous, and you can clearly see that it's not something that was sent to them, but it was sent to a lot of people in bulk. So this is something that would really help. And uh, in terms of expectations, you really can't expect a lot of professors to even reply to you saying that it's not possible. You would just be ghosted by most professors. So I would say in terms of expectations, it's always better to approach a set of really ambitious set of professors, and also professors who might be a little bit within your reach. And this is mostly in terms of the ranking of that college and how credible that the professor is in that field. Because suppose you want to do something that is really in demand, like let's say you want to do something in machine learning, which most people get around to doing nowadays. So it's really hard to get a professor to mentor you in that. So if you pick a professor who doesn't have that much of work experience and who's trying to gradually progress in his field, who's a budding professor, probably young, and if you approach him, the odds of you landing a research internship with him is much more than if you had done the same thing for a good professor in a much better college. So yeah, it's quite important to manage your expectations and your ambitions in that sense as well.
Definitely, and it's something that is amazing to do as well. I guess contributing to research is definitely amazing, and the experience that someone will receive, it's really something
Yeah,
that won't be available in other things, right?
that's
Okay, the
true.
next question is how important is networking in cybersecurity by Sumit, and I would presume that networking as a topic, that's what he's talking about. So again, yeah,
Yeah.
how important is networking in cybersecurity?
Yeah, it's definitely important. Like it's one subject uh, that's that's crucial for any computer science major. So, in fact, I did a minor in computer science in my BTech along with my major. And one of the biggest drawbacks of the coursework of our minor degree was that networking was not a subject there. So it's very shocking for me to see that people really didn't give much of importance to that subject. But when you actually start working in the computer science field, you see how important it is uh, to know everything that you can know inside that subject. So it's extremely important for cybersecurity because network security is a very big subdomain of cybersecurity, and it's something that even if someone doesn't want to be a network security engineer, you will have to end up knowing how it works anyway, because it's sort of, if you would like take the entire structure of every company or any architecture, networks would definitely be a part of that. So you just can't have something that doesn't have networks, right? You really need to know the rudimentary knowledge of networks, starting with TCP/IP and how anything, how the packets go from each computer to computer, because that would help you tackle the problems that you would need to face in your role in any company, and any topic that you end up working in or doing research in will definitely be related to networks in some way, for sure, in some direction or the other. So it's extremely important. Like it's a must that everyone learns subject, even if it's offered to them, or if it's not offered to them, you just have to learn the subject by yourself.
Definitely, and I think the resources are also available. A lot many resources are available on YouTube and any other
Of course,
platforms.
yeah, yeah,
Again, the next question, Dinesh, important courses for cybersecurity. I guess you have already covered that question. Coursera and Udemy is something that would be really helpful in that case.
yeah,
Again, can you share some good resources for learning cybersecurity? Okay, again, I'll again take this question in a fast way. Let's say we have already discussed about playlists and courses, but if you have to refer maybe articles or maybe a community of cybersecurity enthusiasts, like we have a lot of communities for data structures algorithms, many in LinkedIn, many in Discord groups,
yeah,
and somewhere. Do we have some groups like this or maybe communities like this for cybersecurity as well? And if we have, or maybe like we have Geek for Geeks, like a platform which offers a lot of
true,
solutions to our technical
yeah,
doubts.
yeah,
We have something for cybersecurity as well, like that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, GSOC is a pretty good platform, and I think they didn't have the topic of cybersecurity, I would say like 3, 4 years back, but I do remember seeing it maybe a year back. I'm not sure if it's still there. But yeah, off the top of my head, I can think of OS as a really, really good platform because they have a really large presence globally, and they also have a lot of student chapters across a lot of colleges. So OS was a really good community get to is a really good community to get into for cybersecurity. Yeah.
Cool. That was pretty much it, and I guess we have already covered most of the questions. Apart from this, Deepthik, anything else that you think that okay, apart from this is something that a fresher should know. Something that if you would have to tell yourself when you were learning cybersecurity, any suggestion or
Yeah.
any feedback, what would it be? Anything like that you'd like to share?
Yeah, overall, I think we've covered most of it. I would just say, because I've gotten this question a lot, like, questions like, what language should I learn for cybersecurity? I would just say that that question is not relevant, and because there is there is no answer to that. Like, there is no language that you have to learn for cybersecurity. Because when you ask the same question for machine learning, a lot of people end up saying Python because most of it deals with
Okay, I guess there was some error. Yeah, you can continue. Sorry for that.
yeah. Yeah. So when it comes to data science and machine learning, a lot of people will end up saying Python because that's what most libraries are in. But when you ask the same question for cybersecurity, it really doesn't make a lot of sense because cybersecurity is something that would come along every other field inside computer science. It can be tagged along with everything else. It can be software, it can be hardware, it can be algorithms, because you can secure anything. So everything can and will possibly have a loophole, and securing that is essentially cybersecurity. So it can tag along with any field inside of computer science. So it's there is no answer to what language you would have to know for cybersecurity. But there is obviously a gradual progression of languages that will help you in tackling like industrial problems, roles, and all that. So I would say having a good hang of uh, Linux is really important. and also scripting inside Linux with Bash or any shell scripting language for that matter is very important because that will help you. Because most of the roles inside cybersecurity will not work with a very comfortable GUI like Windows. So it will mostly be scripting. So you have to know some scripting language. That's extremely important. And also after that, you gradually branch out to different domains. Like if you go to web, you'll have to know JavaScript or PHP. If you go to databases, you'll have to know SQL or some other programming languages. And in terms of general applications, obviously you cannot get away without C and C++. So you definitely have to know that because I've seen a lot of people jumping directly to Python and Java without actually learning C or C++. But in my opinion, everyone should definitely start out with C or C++, because that's where everything else branches up from. So this is like the root of all other programming languages. So it's definitely good to know C or C++. Yeah, that's one. And also competitive coding. So a lot of people have asked me if competitive coding is really necessary to get into a security role because most of competitive coding uh, is usually practiced and done by people who are trying to sit for your normal SDE roles, right? So a lot of people uh, would assume that it's not needed for cybersecurity, but it's needed as much as it's needed for an SDE role. So very important that they do whatever everyone else does, which is practice your data structures and algos and make sure to do a lot of problems on HackerRank and just usual set of competitive coding topics. So yeah, it's something that can't be ignored. It has to be done as much as uh, and as much as people who practice it for other roles as well. Yeah,
Definitely.
I think
And I
yeah.
think there has been a lot of debate about this, projects and versus DSA,
Mhm.
project-oriented approach versus learning approach. So I think the debate should not exist in this case because
Exactly. Yeah.
all good to learn data structures algorithms. Even if you are doing projects, you are not doing projects. Whatever your domain, data structures are definitely a part of it in some way or the other. So it's always.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think this debate is
Yeah.
something which doesn't really make sense to people who are actually aware
Yeah.
about this curriculum and who understand the industry well. Cool.
That's right.
So that's pretty much it. It was nice interacting with you, Deepthik. Again, you shared a lot of many insights. I got to know a lot of many things, new things as well. I guess it would definitely help the viewers as well and the community of CDN. Looking forward to host you once again in the future, definitely, whenever we'll be available, and we'll definitely catch up in the future as well. So thank you so much for joining in, and yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Thank